It is good to see you guys here today. Today is one of those days where it seems like everybody is either sick or out of town, and so I am glad to see all your smiling faces today. I'm assuming everybody had a good Christmas. Yes, good, good. We all survived. We're all a little bit. There's a little bit more of us probably today than there was last week, just based upon what we ate this past week, and probably a lot of not doing much and sitting around. But yes, it's good to have you all here this morning. A couple of announcements, kind of going forward for into next year. First things first, this Wednesday night, of course, we do not have Wednesday night service, but starting on Wednesday night, January 8th, we are changing the start times of our Wednesday night services. So meals will still start at 6 o'clock, but service is going to start at 6:30. That includes the Bible study, the adult Bible study, all the kids programs, all of that. It's going to go from 6:30 to 7:30. We've just had some. I'm trying to figure out the nice way of saying this. This is going to make things easier for a lot of different people. And plus, you get a chance to get your kids home a little bit earlier on Wednesday nights as well. So 6:30 to 7:30 is going to be the new start time, new service times on Wednesday nights. Still have meals at 6 o'clock, and then everything will start at 6:30. So, and then also, let me make sure I get this right. Last year, we have Family Resource Center that happens the first Monday of every month. And last year, we were able to give out over 13,000 diapers to people in our community, which is awesome. And that's just diapers. That doesn't include all the other stuff that we have. Obviously, one of the biggest draws that we have are the diapers and then the laundry detergent. And we found out a few months ago that we were losing our diaper supplier. And so after doing some looking and researching, we were able to find a new diaper bank, a new supplier that we've already signed contracts and stuff with for next year. But part of that, because we're changing our supplier who we were getting stuff before. So starting in January, we will no longer be called the Family Resource Center. That was the name we had to use based upon our supplier last time. We are now going to be the Family Connection Center. So FCC, if you hear say FCC instead of FRC, that's what that means. And so everything is going to stay the same as far as what we're giving away each month, but it's just going to have a new name. So we're excited about this new supplier. I know we just placed our first order, and what was the total on that first order? Yeah, the monetary value of our first order was over $13,000 that we're going to be able to really expand what we're doing now and be able to get a little bit more honed in. We kind of before, whatever we got is what we had, and sometimes we run out of certain sizes. Now we can specifically order sizes. It includes wipes and then female hygiene products and all sorts of stuff. And so it's pretty exciting. So if you see something about name changes or we're new or different names, everything's the same except for the name. And so we are excited for this new partnership. We think it's going to be really, really good for that. So last Sunday of the year, it's crazy, isn't it? It just seems like just yesterday. And sometimes I say things, I'm like, oh my goodness, that's what old people used to say when I was young. Now I realize I am kind of the old guy. But not as old as some, apparently. But it just seems like not too long ago, we were celebrating our 20th anniversary in this building, right? Remember that last January when we had that big service? That was awesome. Now it's at the end of the year. This is only a few more days left of the year. And a lot of times at the end of things, the temptation, or we start off a year, right? Here, we can't start it on Wednesday because you can't start a new thing on a holiday. You have to wait till the second. But we're going to make New Year's resolutions, right? We're going to want to maybe lose a little bit of weight, or we want money. We want to be better with our money, and we do good for a while. But towards the end of the year, after we get into it for a little while, we don't finish as strong as what we started. And hopefully, for all of us, this past year, 2024, we've all grown in our walk with Jesus. And the thing is that when we do that, we make that effort to grow. After a while, the temptation can be we kind of lose a little bit of steam, and we don't finish as strong as we started. right? And that's the thing about the Christian walk. It's not about how you start. It's all about how you finish. You can have the best of intentions. You can start off extremely well, but if you don't finish well, then there's a problem. But the flip side is, so it doesn't matter how bad you started. It's all about how you finish. And so we have to finish strong. We have to keep pressing forward. We can't allow the things in this world to stop us potentially or hinder our progress. And so this morning, I want to look at somebody in the Bible who they started well, but they didn't finish as well as they should have. And I remember, when I was growing up playing basketball, like our coach, he was a sadist, and he loved to make us suffer, right? He would run us till we puked, and then we'd run some more. Now, a cool thing happened to me yesterday. I'm the assistant coach on Arrows, her 3rd and 4th grade basketball team. We made a 3rd or 4th grade girl puke yesterday at practice, which was awesome. Not even joking. Dead serious. It was great. Luckily, it was the coach's kid, so it wasn't. But anyway, like he would, and the point was is that he would run us and run us and run us and run us. And if you had a bad game, we had to run. Played bad, you didn't play hard, you had to run, right? You didn't do something wrong, you had to run. Christmas break, practice after practice, and he would run us, and we'd walk into the gym, and there would be trash cans in the gym, and we knew what kind of day it was going to be. Now, as a result of that, all of us can run like 5-minute miles without even breaking a sweat. But the point was is that we were, the whole reason why is that because when it came to the 4th quarter, it didn't matter if the game was close, we were probably going to win. Even if we had played bad and we were down 10 or 12 points going into the 4th quarter, we were probably going to win because while the other team was tired, we were just getting started, and we would fast break, full court press the entire 4th quarter while the other teams, doing one of these, and we're ready, because it was not how we started, it was how we finished. And in our walk with Jesus, even if we stumble coming out of the gates, if we don't have our best going, it's not how we start, it's how we finish. And so this story in 2 Chronicles chapter 24, it's a story of, it's a warning of what not to do. And so I want to look at this story this morning and how to finish strong. And so 2 Chronicles chapter 24, starting in verse 1, and we're just going to kind of walk through this together this morning. So it starts off this way. Joash was 7 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 40 years. His mother's name was Zibiah. We'll call it that. I don't really know. I can't pronounce most of these names. She was from Beersheba. Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years of Jehoiada the priest. Jehoiada chose 2 wives for him, and he had sons and daughters. Imagine becoming king at 7. Maddox is 7. Imagine Maddox being the king. It would be nothing but like poop jokes, pranks, and quite frankly, like he's going to ruin our economy. Right? He just has he's going to spend and spend and spend. The other day, Steve hooked us up with the place that he works, they had a Cybertruck. And Maddox he loves Cybertrucks. And every time he sees one, and so we got to go and ride in one. And then when we got done, it was great. The entire ride was awesome. It was wonderful until we got done. And then he did not understand why Dad was not going to buy a $100,000 truck. Just buy it, Dad. Just put it on the credit card. Son, that's not how this works. We'll just pay for it. I don't have, like that. No, it's not going to happen. Like he would bankrupt. But now that I'm talking about it, like he's really no different than any politician we have now. So he'd probably be as, fiscally responsible as any president in my lifetime. But anyway, he might be perfect for Congress. Joash becomes king at 7, and the backstory as to the reason why he becomes king at 7 is because he comes from a long line of terrible people. All the kings before him and his family line, they were all terrible kings. And in chapter 22, we read that Joash's dad was a terrible king. He did evil in the sight of the Lord, and he was eventually killed. Joash's grandma, at this point, so her son dies, and Joash he's like baby at this point, and his grandma says, hey, my son just died, somebody else is going to be king, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to kill all my grandkids, all my nieces and nephews and sisters and brothers and the entire royal family. I'm going to kill them all and wipe them all out so that I can become queen. Joash's grandpa was so wicked that when he died, Scripture says that he died to no one's regret. People were happy that he died. And going back even further, you see that Joash's grandma, the one who killed her grandkids, her dad was King Ahab. And King Ahab was as wicked of a king as there ever was. And so Joash becomes king at 7 because his family is an absolute mess. Some of us, maybe we can understand that kind of feeling, right? Like your family is just a whole line of just people who maybe they tried really hard, but they weren't there, or people that didn't really care. And so Joash they're all terrible people except for one aunt who is married to Jehoiada, and she takes Joash and hides him from his grandma as a baby so that he can survive. And for 6 years, she hides him. This is when the chief priest, Jehoiada, he steps in and has the queen killed for her evil ways. He tears down the altars and the idols of Baal, and he places Joash in his rightful place as king. Now, Jehoiada also, he hooks his boy up with 2 wives. That was not offered to me when I took this job. I guess people are no longer, want to follow what the biblical standards were when a priest places it. Anyway, listen, I'm kidding. My wife has plenty of personalities to keep me entertained for the rest of my life. More than enough. So Jehoiada, he takes control. He places Joash as king at 7 years old. In verse 4, we see sometime later, Joash decided to restore the temple of the Lord. Now, anytime in the Bible when the temple is mentioned, what it's trying to what it's trying to get us to understand is that it's this idea, the idea of worship is what is being promoted. So Joash is bringing about this spiritual revival to all the people in the land. He is bringing back to the front and center the idea that the temple is a place of worship. It's not just something that we take pride in. It is a place that we need to go to. We need to worship. We need to get back to worshiping God. And he wants his people to be a people of worship. So he begins this journey of restoring the temple. And Joash, he understands that no matter how prosperous the country of Judah might be, if they don't honor the Lord, it was all for nothing. In his heart, he not only wants Judah to be a place they want to be prosperous and financially, and they want to be a political power. Not only, he wants them to be a people of worship. He wants the temple to be at the front and center. His heart, his works, his commands are all in the right place. He is trying to break this generational curse that is over his family that goes back generations. His dad, his grandpa, his great-grandpa, and on and on and on. He is doing his best to break all of these generational curses. In verse 5, it says this: he called together the priests and the Levites and said to them, "Go to the towns of Judah and collect the money due annually from all Israel to repair the temple of your God. Do it now." But the Levites did not act at once. Therefore the king summoned Jehoiada, the chief priest, and said to them, "Why haven't you required the Levites to bring in from Judah and Jerusalem the tax imposed by Moses, the servant of the Lord, and by the assembly of Israel for the tent of the covenant law?" There's a lot of ways that we could go here, right? Like there you have this king, like this leader of Judah, and he's passionately playing with his people. They're like, hey, we have a job to do. We have a calling on our life, but in order for us to rebuild the temple, in order for us to reach our calling, it's going to require all of us to give financially to that project. We don't want to talk about money in church, so we're not going to talk about money in church, okay? So don't worry. We just did that a couple months ago. We're not going to do it again. But Jehoiada understands that we can have all the wants that we desire. I want to do this. I think we should do this. I feel like this is what God is calling us to do. But unless we are financially committed to the project, we're never going to reach it because it takes finances in order to do what they're trying to do. And so we need to keep that in mind as we continue to expand our footprint in Windsor and in this area, that it's going to take some resources in order to do that. And so we can't drag our feet. We can't, I don't know, I don't know if this is what I want to do. Like, I don't know if this is what God has asked. No, we need to be all in. It's not enough for our heart to be in the right place. Our finances have to be in the right place as well. And so we're going to skip the next 7 verses because once again, it's talking a lot about money, and that's not the focus of this morning. And we get to verse 15 and we read this. Now Jehoiada was old and full of years, and he died at the age of 130. He was buried with the kings in the city of David because of the good he had done in Israel for God and his temple. So Jehoiada, this great man, this great priest, he's an incredible uncle. He is a kingmaker. He dies and he is buried in a place that is reserved for kings. He wasn't a king, but because of all the great things that he had done for the kingdom, for the people, for the king, he receives this incredible honors. He was one man, but look at what the impact one man can have. A lot of times we think, listen, I'm just one person. What difference can I make? Right? I'm trying to make a difference at work, but there's a whole bunch of heathens that I work with, and I'm one person, and they're not getting it. They don't care. They don't listen. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But the reality is that one person that is willing to stand up against evil, to stand up for what is right, can make a massive impact. Charles Spurgeon says it this way: see the influence of one man. One man can sway a state. It does not matter the things that you might be facing, the things that are in front of you, the pressure going on around you. If you are willing to make a stand, you can make an impact on those around you. At this point in his life, King Joash, he has done well. Now, we don't have the exact timeline of all this is happening, but Jehoiada probably dies somewhere. He's been with the king for probably 25 to 30 years old. So Joash is probably somewhere between 32 and 37 years old at this point when Jehoiada dies. And all during that time, Joash has followed the commands of the Lord. But there's one statement at the beginning of the chapter in verse 2, and there's kind of there's ominous undertones to it. It says this: Joash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all the years of Jehoiada the priest. All the years of Jehoiada. Now, at approximately somewhere in his mid-30s, for the first time in his adult life, Joash is without a mentor. He's without the guy who's protected him. He is by himself. He's all alone. And what we read next is quite shocking, starting in verse 17. It says, after the death of Jehoiada, the officials of Judah came and paid homage to the king, and he listened to them. They abandoned the temple of the Lord, the God of their ancestors, and worshipped Asherah poles and idols. Because of their guilt, God's anger came on Judah and Jerusalem. Although the Lord sent prophets to the people to bring them back to him, and though they testified against them, they would not listen. Joash is a strong king. He's a powerful king. He's got some impact in his life. And as soon as Jehoiada dies, the vultures start swarming. They see an opening. It's like, hey, this guy's no longer protected. Like, let's see what we can see if we can get our claws into him. These officials of Judah, they show up to pay homage, but it's pretty obvious that their main goal is we want to get in close with this king. He's vulnerable right now. Let's see what we can do. Maybe he will start listening to us. He listened to Jehoiada, and so for the very first time in his adult life, Joash is vulnerable, and the vultures are taking advantage of that. And almost immediately, the last 25, 30 years of Joash's life, where he is really committed to doing what is right in God's eye. He wants this spiritual revival to take place. He's tearing down the high places, the worship places, all those things. And in 25 years, almost immediately, all of that goes away. His commitment to the people, commitment to God, commitment to the temple, all of that goes away. And God even sends people. It says that although the Lord sent prophets to the people to bring them back to him, they wouldn't listen. So God is trying to get back into his heart. God is trying to bring him back into the fold. And Joash just doesn't want to listen. God is trying to get him to change his way, but he has completely shut his heart off to the things of God. And if that's not crazy enough, what we read next, the story takes another crazy turn that's shocking as well. Verse 20. Then the Spirit of God came on Zechariah, son of Jehoiada, the priest. He stood before the people and said, "This is what God says. Why do you disobey the Lord's command? You will not prosper. Because you have forsaken the Lord, he has forsaken you." But they plotted against him, and by the order of the king, they stoned him to death in the courtyard of the Lord's temple. King Joash did not remember the kindness Zechariah's father Jehoiada had shown him, but killed his son, who said as he lay dying, "May the Lord see this and call you to account." That is a crazy 22 verses we see there. Joash, he starts his life with just so much promise and so much potential. And by the verse 22, we see that he has killed his most trusted advisor's son. The guy who literally kept him safe from the time he was about 1 year old till he was 7 and provided protection for him and kept him safe, killed his grandma who was trying to kill him, made him a king. The guy who had protected him, guided him, served him, helped him. The guy who literally made him king, you've forgotten all about him. This guy's son shows up and Joash has him killed for daring to tell him the same things that his father had probably been telling him for years and years. Joash goes from passionately pursuing and promoting an era of worship for the people of Judah to having, like, this is like the chief priest. This is the number one guy, Zechariah. Is like, hey, I don't like you anymore, so I'm going to kill you because you dared to stand up against me. Joash has made a complete 180. And from here, the story continues on that soon after this happens, Joash, not too long after he's had Zechariah killed, Joash is wounded in battle, and when he is taken home, his own officials kill him in his bed because of what he did to Zechariah. Chapter 24 is this wild ride of a story, and because this chapter starts with so much promise, so much hope. The previous kings, they were wicked, they were evil, they were bloodthirsty tyrants, right? They did evil things, and this 7-year-old kid shows up, has a great mentor, has a bright future. He starts out by bringing the people of Judah back to worship. There's a lot of them who a lot of people in Judah, they had only experienced pagan worship. They had no idea anything other than pagan rituals and altars and worship. That's all they had ever known. And Joash introduces them to something new. He ushers them back into worship God. And within a few verses, it all goes wrong. That's a crazy story. But it's a story that we need to learn from. Right? Because otherwise it's just a story. Every story, if we want to learn from something, we need to understand the lessons that are involved. So what lessons can we learn from Joash, from this story, that will help us to start strong, stay strong, and finish strong? And number one is surround yourself with godly people. Who are you listening to? Who is influencing you? The best way to finish strong is to surround yourself by people who have the same goals that you do, that are pursuing the same things that you are. Surround yourself with people who want the same thing as you, because we have the same end goal. Time and time again, you see in Scripture, dozens of times, you see somebody who means well, starts well, has good intentions, bad influences come into their life, and they begin to pull them away from what they're trying to accomplish. And so we see people who have all the talent and ability and opportunity to create a massive impact. They fall short because of those who are influences around them. And the Bible warns us of this repeatedly. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. Do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. And my mom used to quote that verse to me growing up, and I hated it, right? I want to hang out with them. No, bad company corrupts good character. Right? That one over and over. Proverbs chapter 22, verse 24. Do not make friends with a hot-tempered person. Do not associate with one easily angered, or you may learn their ways and get yourself ensnared. Once again, be careful who you hang out with, because you're going to take on the personality of that person. Proverbs chapter 13, verse 20. Walk with the wise and become wise, for a companion of fools suffers harm. You are what you hang out with. If you want to be wise, hang out with wise people. If you want to be a dummy, hang out with dummies. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 7, stay away from a fool, for you will not find knowledge on their lips. Proverbs 27, 17, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We are going to take on the personalities and the habits of those people that we hang around with. Surround yourself with the right people. Don't listen to those who show up years later when all the hard work is done. Joash has spent decades really trying to make an impact, trying to change things, and all of a sudden these guys show up after all the work is done. Don't listen to people who didn't care about you until they needed something from you or wanted something from you. You made all this hard work. You made all this progress. And these people were nowhere around. They weren't helping you. But all of a sudden you bettered yourself, right? Get a little bit of money in your pocket. Get your life straightened out. You get this or you get that. And I was like, hey, buddy, how you been? No, you weren't here in the struggle. You're not going to hang. You're not going to have an impact. You're not going to have an influence in my life. Now, I remember growing up, like we had this, we had some property and my dad would let people hunt. And then people take advantage of it. And he, say, no, you can't hunt anymore. And then one year, he was sitting around, and I was working at FedEx at the time, and we were waiting on the airplane to come in one morning, and somebody's like, oh, I wish I could hunt, and, John, you could ever let me hunt? And he said, listen, you weren't here in the summer when it's 110 degrees and we were planting food plots. You didn't call me saying, hey, can I come help you do this? Can I come help you hang tree stands? You weren't there in that part. You're not going to reap the benefits of it now. Sometimes we have to cut people out and keep them away because they're coming in at a time where maybe we're vulnerable. Maybe all this work that we've done and they're trying to destroy it. If they're not helping you in the process to get stronger, be leery of them coming into your life afterwards. Now, I understand. It sounds like I'm saying, don't hang out with sinners. Don't hang out with evil people, right? If they don't come to this church or they don't love Jesus, don't hang out with them. I'm not saying that totally. To a degree, that is true. I'm saying be careful of who is influencing who. Who is influencing you? I get we need to be around people who don't know Jesus. We need to be a light in a dark world. But if we spend all of our time with that in the darkness, eventually the darkness is going to overtake us if we are not careful. All these verses that I just quoted in Proverbs, you know who wrote those? King Solomon. Here's the irony of all this. King Solomon is the wisest, richest person who ever lived. He makes Elon Musk look poor. He's worth trillions of dollars, right, in today's money. And yet he writes time and time again, be careful who you hang out with. Bad company corrupts good character, on and on and on. Do you know what Solomon did with all of his wisdom? He married 700 pagan wives. And at the end of the story of King Solomon, know what you read? King Solomon turns his back on God. The God who had blessed him with so many things because all of the influences around him had turned his heart away from God. Be careful who you allow to speak into your life. If they do not have the same goals as you, be careful. I don't take financial advice from people who are broke. I take advice from people who are wiser than I do. I listen to people who are at a position where I want to get to. They have a relationship with their wife that I want to have a relationship with their kids that I want to have. They're the pastors who are pastoring churches of where I want us to get to because they have the experience and they care about me. They're talking from a place that they know what they're talking about. So be careful who you allow to influence you because no one is above being influenced, which is what our second point, which brings us to our second point. You have to have your own relationship with God. Now, this is purely speculation on my part. This is me trying to read between the lines and figure out what happened to Joash. But my guess would be Jehoiada is a very strong personality. And he has a very strong relationship with God. He loved God. He loved the things of God. And because he was such a hero to Joash, all Joash wanted to do when he was young was to be like Jehoiada. And so to be like Jehoiada, he had to love the things that Jehoiada loved and do the things that Jehoiada did. And while his zeal for the temple and for worship and for God were legitimate, they were real at the beginning. They weren't his. Jehoiada's passion was infectious, but it never really got into the heart of Joash. Joash's head knowledge of God and who God was never became heart knowledge. I know a lot of random things. It's weird. Like Katie constantly is telling me, how do you know that? I don't know. I don't know how I know that. I listen to a lot. I read a lot. I listen to a lot of podcasts on a lot of different topics and a lot of different things. So I know a little about a lot. And I just finished reading this incredible book from Peter Katstick called Death in the Long Grass. And Peter was a professional hunter in Africa in the heydays of African hunting, like in the 60s and 70s and 80s and into the 90s. And in his book, he shares about a lot of the close calls that he had in 20 plus years of hunting in Africa. He talks about being charged by an elephant at 10 feet. Near-death experiences with leopards and lions and Cape buffalo and rhino, elephants, crocodiles, hippos, hyenas, wild dogs, black mambas, snakes, puff adder snakes, all of these things. So I read what it's like to be charged from an elephant at 10 feet. I read about what that's like. I read about what it's like to be walking to your toilet, and as you're almost to the toilet, a 12-foot black mamba snake rises up out of the toilet. I read what it's like to be charged by a hippo as you're walking down a path at night out of the dark, and all of a sudden this hippopotamus comes running out of the woods and charges you. I read what it's like to be trailing a wounded leopard through the thick brush, and all of a sudden you realize, oh my goodness, that leopard has doubled back, climbed a tree, and is sitting on the limb above me, waiting for me to walk past so it can drop down on me. I've read about what that's like, and while he's an incredible writer, and it feels, as you're reading this, you really feel like you're in that moment, guess what? I don't really know what it's like to be charged from an elephant at 10 feet. That's his story. That's his experience. Now, he can relate it to us, and he can talk to us, but until I stand in Africa and have an elephant charge at me, or a black mamba try to eat me, or a lion try to eat me, I don't truly know what it's like in that moment. Jehoiada has a real passionate relationship with God. Joash, he might have meant well, he may have done well, but it never truly was his relationship with God. It was Jehoiada's. He was living through Jehoiada's, his relationship. And so many times we think, well, my wife is saved, my husband is saved, they have a relationship with God, so their relationship is my relationship and I'm living. No. Your relationship with God has to be your relationship with God. You cannot rely on somebody else's religion in order to be enough for you. Jonathan Edwards, in his sermon, Divine and Supernatural Light, he said this. He says, your mind can know honey. Your mind can know honey is sweet. People can tell you it's sweet. You've read books about it, etc. But if you haven't actually tasted it, you know with your head, but not with your heart. When you actually taste it, you experience it for yourself and know it in a full way. And you can know it in your heart. My guess would be because of how quickly Joash's relationship with the Lord was led astray and how quickly he was led astray. He suffered from what Isaiah quotes the Lord saying in Isaiah chapter 29, verse 13. It says, the Lord says, these people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship, God is saying that their worship is based upon mere human rules when they have from the things that they have been taught. Right? We know it in our head, but we don't know it in our heart. And that's the question. If we want to finish strong, we have to make sure that we're following the Lord because that's what our heart is saying. That's because of our relationship, not because that's what our parents want us to do, or what our spouse wants us to do, or what somebody else thinks that we should do. Are we doing that, or are we following Jesus because he has truly touched our life, saved us from a place of hopelessness and darkness, and changed everything about our future? Somebody else's relationship with Jesus, it can't save you. It can't get you into heaven. It can't radically change your life. It might shield you for a while. It might hold you on for a while. Joash, as long as he had Jehoiada there, as long as he had that presence there to keep him centered, he was good. But as soon as that presence was taken away, his relationship with God was weak, and he was quickly led astray. If it's not yours, when temptation comes, when times get difficult, you have no foundation on which to rely. Understand, we need to have a head knowledge of who God is. One of the things that drives me crazy about Christians in general, right? I'm not speaking to specific, but Christians in general, you see them talking to somebody or debating, and they truly don't have any knowledge of who Jesus is, right? Or what the Bible says. They can quote a verse or two, but it's like, well, why do you believe that? Because the Bible says. Well, where does the Bible say that? I don't know. It says it somewhere in there. I think Christians in general, we should have a better head knowledge of what God's Word said and who God is. We should be able to defend our faith when somebody asks us something. But head knowledge is not enough. We have to have heart knowledge. It has to move from our head into our heart where we allow Jesus to radically transform everything about us so that when we go out into the world, we are not easily swayed when the world tells us to go left or go right. When people come in who want what's worse for us, don't care about us personally, they just want what's best for them, we can see it and we can distance ourselves from them and say, you know what? No, I don't want any of that because I know who God says I am. I know what God says I must do. Can't stay in our heads. It has to work into our hearts. We have to experience Jesus for ourselves. Worship team, if you guys come on up. If you read the story of Joash, you can also read it in 2 Kings chapter 12. That's another chapter in which it's told. And in that chapter, we read a new detail. In verse 3 of 2 Kings chapter 12, it says, the high places, however, were not removed. The people continued to offer sacrifice and burn incense there. So when Joash makes all these rules, we're going to rebuild the temple, we're going to tear down, he didn't tear down all of the idols. He tore down most of them, he tore down some of them, but he didn't get rid of all of them. Joash did right in the eyes of the Lord, but he didn't completely destroy all the evil of his past. He didn't completely destroy all the wickedness from his past. He allowed a small part of it to continue on. And I would guess that these men who eventually would lead him astray, they were probably trained in those high places that Joash didn't remove and didn't completely destroy. They were probably corrupted at these pagan high places. And if Joash would have completely done all that he should, his story might have ended differently. Because we can try, we can do our best, but if we don't completely root out all the wickedness, all the evil, if we allow just a little bit of our past to stay in our life, eventually that little bit can grow and grow and grow till it becomes a problem for us. Will you stand with me? If you want to finish well, we have to remove all the temptations, all the evil, and all the wickedness. We cannot allow one little thing to go unchecked, because one little thing can lead to another, and then more and more and more, until eventually we find ourselves doing a 180, and we no longer recognize who we used to be, or what we used to believe, or how we used to behave. In order to finish strong, we have to live a life completely devoted. We cannot give the enemy an inch into our life. We also need to be open to godly reproval. Zechariah was a good priest, right? And a lot of times we want to, as the worship team begins to play, we don't want to hear about the things in our life that we don't want to talk about, right? And Joash, he didn't want to hear from anybody, hey, you're doing something wrong. We need people in our life that's willing to look at you and be like, you know what, Garrett? You're messing up, bro. You know what? You're not messing. I don't know. I'm just using you as an example. Everyone's like, Garrett. I did tell him, like, listen, he finished his first semester of his Bible college. He still doesn't have a girlfriend. So he's probably going to be single for the rest of his life. He's messing up on that one. He should have had a wife locked down by now. All the good ones will be gone now. If you didn't go to Bible college, you won't understand that. But trust me, that's how it works. We need to be open when somebody who loves you and cares about you speaks into your life and says, you know what? I love you enough to tell you I think you're messing up. I love you enough to say, you know what? There's something in your life you need to get rid of. We need to hear that. That's not church hurt when somebody calls you out on your sin. That is somebody who loves you enough to speak into your life. So we got to be careful. We got to allow people to have that influence in our lives and say, you know what? I trust you when you speak into my life. Just because somebody calls us out on something doesn't mean that they hate us or they're trying to embarrass us. No, they're trying to help us. Zechariah saw a problem and he loved Joash enough to speak into it. So not only do we need to accept it, we need to be willing to see when we see somebody messing up, saying, hey, you know what? I love you enough to talk to you about it. I love you enough to try to get you to turn your ways. Zechariah had Joash's best interest at heart, yet Joash couldn't hear or any rebuke or correction. He felt like he was above it, and nobody can tell me what to do. Never get to the point where you can't accept correction from people who love you, who care about you, and have your best interest and at heart and are godly, that care about you. Finish well. Finish strong means that we are aware of what's going on around us. We have people in our life that speaks into us, that we can go to and talk to, that want what's best for us. And that relationship with God is not your parents' relationship. It's not your spouse's relationship. It's not your kids'. It's yours. That heart knowledge is what could have saved Joash. But my opinion, my guess is, it never moved from here to here. It was always somebody else's. He just followed along with it. Finish strong means you're aware of all these things and you have that relationship with Jesus.